The Compliance Life details the journey to and in the role of a Chief Compliance Officer. How does one come to sit in the CCO chair? What are some of the skills a CCO needs to successfully navigate the compliance waters in any company? What are some of the top challenges CCOs have faced, and how did they meet them? These questions and many others will be explored in this new podcast series. The Compliance Life is hosted by Tom Fox, and each month he'll present the story of one CCO through 4 episodes. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
Before we get to John Melican, a quick word from our sponsor.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back with John Melican and our continuing exploration of his journey to and from the CCO chair on this month on the Compliance Live. John, first of all, welcome back.
Oh, thanks. Great to be back.
John, I'm not quite sure I will see you smile as much again because I'm seeing you as we record this, although our audience is only hearing this audio. You clearly enjoyed your time with the Manhattan DA. But you moved into the corporate world. So I was wondering if you could tell us your first move into the corporate world, and then you moved more into financial services at Bearn Sterns. So I know you went to the New York Stock Exchange, and then you went over to Bearn Sterns. So I was wondering if you could tell us about those first 2 steps in the corporate world.
Yeah, coming out of law enforcement and having a background in securities fraud, some former colleagues really, I met up with them. Went to the New York Stock Exchange, which was in a tremendous phase of transition. This is back in 2004, 2005. It's a great institution. They were in the middle of a lot of change. So I was only there for about a year when some other colleagues who had moved on from law enforcement and ended up at Bearn Sterns gave me a call and said, do you want to be the AML officer for Bearn Sterns, or work in the AML department more accurately? And I said, sure, sounds good. The money was better, and we were midway into a family at that point. So it was enticing, and went over to join the AML department at Bearn Sterns with some good friends, and eventually ended up working for a great woman named Arlene Samaya, who ran that place for a long time as the AML officer, and learned a lot from her. So it was a quick transition into financial services and into AML. But at those early stages of AML, if you had what they used to say, a badge and a smile, you could land a job in AML at a bank, because they were looking for folks from law enforcement to come in and work in the compliance departments.
So that really was maybe I should step back. It wasn't the very first days of AML, but it was early AML after the Patriot Act, which was a sea change for the Bank Secrecy Act. When you were there, were you helping to actually, design, create, and implement policies to comply with the Patriot Act and really build that program out at Bearn Sterns?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, you're right. I mean, when the Patriot Act came out, I was sitting in the DA's office, and we were learning how to use it for law enforcement. By the time I got to Bearn Sterns, the policies and procedures have been written, but we were doing things like operating homegrown transaction monitoring systems. The sanctions filters were, pretty rudimentary. The process around negative news was almost non-existent. You had to go give formatted search strings to people to exercise. A lot of people doing it. And in Bearn Sterns, where you're doing really correspondent broker-dealer work, and it was a full-service investment bank, you had a lot of different things going on between payments and receipts of securities. It was a great learning experience, and actually a tremendously fun place to work, until 2007, and then it wasn't as much fun as it was before that. But yeah, it was early days, by comparison to today and the sophistication that's applied to it now. But yeah, there were still new regs being implemented all the time. We're still getting rid of things like numbered accounts. Bearer shares were still fairly popular, so you had a lot more to deal with back in those days than you see now.
So you went to then American Express, or American Express Travel. It seems to me that's moving from not that Bearn Sterns was small, but Amex is huge, and literally all over the world. So what was maybe that experience like, moving to a size and established corporate presence of American Express and American Express Travel.
Yeah, I mean, again, and there's a theme that runs through this. A lot of how I got to be each and every place was really highly dependent on a lot of the people that I met along the way, and I'll spare everybody the names. But when I was at Bearn Sterns, we transitioned to being J.P. Morgan there for a little while. The famous sale or takeover, whatever it was. But some very generous, very smart people that are well known in the community. They took you in and they said, look, we understand you're looking at opportunity at American Express. And they honestly said, that's possibly a good idea for you. There's really talented people over there. I had an opportunity to work with a gentleman named Rick Small, who famously wrote the SAR rule. And, it was just one of those transitions that made sense. But again, like you said, going from an investment bank to sort of the corporate behemoth of American Express, it also allowed me to exercise some new skills and learn a lot more of how to operate in a huge environment like that. And, inside American Express and travel related services, which was really the MSB, it wasn't the card side of things. It was more the famous traveler's checks, gift cards. They had an FX business there. They had, the obvious travel business, the exchange houses. It was a lot of the things that, obviously had no risk to them from an AML perspective. It was a lot. It was a lot of interesting products and services. Some of them old, some of them brand new, but it was a great experience. Gift cards at the time, and electronic gift cards in particular, were fairly new. And traveler's checks at that point were, already a dinosaur, but still, a lucrative business for American Express, and something that mysteriously was still fairly widely used around the world, although, not very popular in the United States anymore.
So what were maybe a couple of lessons that you learned that you took from moving over to, as you said, the behemoth? Was it really just learning to navigate in and around a company of that size and work with what I would assume to be fairly rigorous set of policies and procedures, or was it something different?
Yeah, I mean, the policies and procedures around, compliance weren't tremendously different than they were, at Bear Stearns or even in the stock exchange, and certainly no more rigorous than the penal code. But it was the surroundings of it. It was because it was so large. It really did stress the importance of, you couldn't have the relationships all in one area like you could at Bear Stearns. You worked with the business, and then you worked with just internal compliance. In American Express, like I'm sure most people have experienced big corporate life, you have to have a working relationship with so much of the structure. You have to have your operations people, you have business operations people, you have HR people, you have IT people. And they're all very spread out. They all have very different constituencies and priorities. So it really put the focus on, if you want to get things done, you have to have not only the skill set, but you have to have the relationships that allow you to get those things done. And that your success and the success of the program that you're trying to drive is equal parts your ability, and then your ability to get other people to help you with that process. And unless and until you learn that, life can be much harder than it needs to be. And they were great people at American Express, really fabulous partners, particularly inside compliance and legal, or they called it compliance and ethics there, working with them, that were tremendous partners. So very, very, very good time, very, very interesting place to work.
John, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode, but I hope our listeners will join us for our third episode in this 4-part series, where we talk a little bit about you moving into the CCO chair. And before we end, though, I wanted to ask if our listeners wanted any more information on yourself or the topics we've discussed today, where can they go?
Just over to Exeter.com is probably the best place to get information.
So, John, I greatly look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks again, Tom.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Thank you again for listening to this episode of The Compliance Life. I hope you will join me again next week, where I take up another episode in The Compliance Life. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. If you would like to be featured on The Compliance Life, please give me an email at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Also, if you like this series, please give us a rating on iTunes. Any review and rating would definitely help get the word out about the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network. Thanks again.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.